And on the 8th day, God looked down on his planned paradise and said, I need a caretaker. So God made a farmer.
Howdy folks, Darren back with you here at Cross Timbers Farm. Welcome to 8th Day Chronicles. Standing here with a tube of grease in my hand. We're getting ready to start our final prep for hay season 2023. It's mid-May, approaching, well, it's a little after the mid-month. We're, I think, about in the 3rd week of May. And well, let me just make sure. We are, yes, we're in the 3rd week of May, and next week the weather really dictates your hay and when you can cut, when your hay reaches prime, when that maturity level is optimal, and when your hay is not past optimal. And then, even if your hay gets to that point, then you're kind of at the mercy of the weather when you can cut it and get it dried down. And we've had our hay cut here on our farm for several years. Late last year, our 2nd cutting on was our first time doing it ourselves. And from my understanding, your first cutting of hay early in the year like this is the hardest time to get your hay dried down to a reasonable moisture content level. And you know, we just don't have those 90-degree days yet with a lot of heat and real high sun and things of that nature to get your hay dried down. Our test plot's ready to be cut. If you had an imaginary line here and this is when it needs to be cut, ours is just barely below that line. It's right very, very close to being prime. I look in this test plot every morning and our main hay fields. I come out every morning at 5 a.m. and me and Susan and go to the milk barn and do the morning milking chores. And when we're done, she heads into the house to process the milk while I'm still in the barn cleaning the milk machine and all that. And as soon as the milk hits the jar and we're done with the milk coming in, she's gone with it. Of course, we put it straight into ice packs in a cooler, and then usually she's gone to go do the processing of that milk and get it bottled up and into the refrigerator. But I take a stroll through especially the test plot almost every morning, unless I'm just in a huge rush, and keep an eye on it, and our main hay fields too. Our main hay fields is not near as close to ready as this test plot is, and the reason for that is we put extra fertilizer on this test plot. And growing quality hay is a constant for me. If you're an old hand at it, an old timer, and you've been doing this your whole life, you have my utmost respect. But for us, the generation that did not grow up cutting hay, it's a continuous learning process. And if you're not learning every day something new, even a little tidbit of something, You should. You should. But I'm learning every day little tidbits as I go along. And through a lot of conversation with my daughter, I'm learning a lot about hay and a lot about forage and growth of the hay and boot stage and things of that nature, when this hay should be cut for not quantity but quality. We could let this hay, and our test plot's already waist high. And me and my daughter has walked it. We did, 2 days ago. She came out and was home for a while, and we walked the test plot and looked at it, and she agreed. She looked at all the hay, got down on her knees and got in the hay and looked at it real good in different areas, and she said, you need to cut it soon, probably within the next week and a half. And I agreed. Our stage of growth for the nutrient value of that hay is getting really close. So, but one thing that is a little bit concerning, and what I was alluding to the weather, is this time of year it's hard to get that hay to dry down from what I've seen so far and what I've talked to some other more experienced hay producers. Their first cutting in the late spring, early summer is usually the hardest to get dried down to a acceptable moisture content to have good hay. And you need a couple more days for that dry down than you would your second or third cutting. Then, okay, I get that. That's no problem. We can schedule it to give it, instead of 3 days, we can give it 4 or 5 days between cutting and baling. Whatever we have to do, depending on the sun and things of that nature, and humidity and getting that hay dried down. Then you got to look at the weather. This time of year in the mountains, man, here in western North Carolina, we don't go usually 4 or 5 days without any rain this time of year. Matter of fact, here lately we've been having rain weekly. Every 2 or 3 days we've been getting rain, which is phenomenal for our hay growth. But if you're to the point where you're ready to start cutting, I sit on that smartphone, and I've got an old smartphone, one of the several years old, little bitty screen. I have to hold it right up to my face, but this younger crowd makes fun of my little phone. But I sit and look at the weather forecast on several different channels, trying to just watch them with my fingers crossed to catch me a day with it. They're saying a full week of sunshine and no rain, and that's sometimes that's almost impossible. But this past winter, thank goodness, we bought a hay tedder. We're really going to need it with this first cutting to keep that hay fluffed and turned to get it to dry. We bought this hay tedder last, I think it was December. It was just before Christmas. I found this on the used market, and I could not be happier with a hay tedder. Now, I've not used it yet, but I saw it run. It runs phenomenal. When I bought it, the guy hooked it up to his tractor and went through the field and scattered some hay, and it ran just like a brand new one. There was no whine in the gearbox, nothing. It ran fantastic. If you're in the market for hay equipment, and you've not bought it yet, ooh, especially if you're looking for a piece of used equipment. We bought this hay tedder in December, and that's when you should be, December, January, February, that's when you need to be, or even on back into November, that's when you need to be looking for your used hay equipment to find a good piece of equipment at a good deal. Just this morning, just out of curiosity, I got on the computer in the farm office and just started doing some quick searches for a hay tedder, just for curiosity's sake. I don't need another one. This tedder cost new about $2,500. We paid less than half for this hay tedder. Fantastic deal, in really good shape. Just this morning, I found one very comparable to this one, and almost as good a shape. Maybe not quite, but the drawback to that tedder, and to me, someone else, this may not bother you at all, but to me, that other hay tedder was 3-point attach. I wanted a drawbar model. I did not want a 3-point attach tedder. I did find one very comparable, but it was a 3-point attach. But it was in pretty darn good shape. Looked a lot like this one. Maybe not quite as good a shape, but very close. And the price of it was $1,500. $1,000 off of a new one, $900 off of a new one. But $1,500, I paid almost half that for this one. And I think it's a better tedder because it's a drawbar model. And that's a personal preference. Bear in mind that a 3-point attached one may suit you just fine. But regardless, this time of year, hay season right up on you and you're trying to find a piece of equipment. And I understand if you've had a breakdown and you got to go find one. But if it's something, you know, you need to plan your purchases through the winter for especially in the used market, and sometimes even new. A lot of the dealers just this time of year, they'll sell their inventory, what they got, because people's in a mad dash for hay season. And the next thing you know, you go buy, if you've made your mind up, well, I'm going to go buy a new one, and you go to the dealership back in February or March, and they had 5 tedders sitting there. You might go back now and there's none left. They're gone. Bad time of year to be trying to buy hay equipment. But in any event, we're making our final preparations for hay season. We, if you can see in the background back here, we have our hay rake out from winter storage, and we have it, if you notice back there, I'll show you in a few moments, we only have 2 wheels. It's a 4-wheel right-hand hay rake. I like the wheel rakes. They're ground driven, no PTO, no nothing. Just took it to your 3-point and go. They do have their advantages and disadvantages, but so far, you know, I kind of like a wheel rake. They're economical, they're financially feasible. Parts for them's easy to get. If you need new teeth on your wheels, or if you just need a new wheel, you can get parts for those pretty easily about anywhere. And they do a pretty good job. The drawback to them is maybe ash content. If you let that thing sit a little bit too low, which is very easy to do, that I've found out over the last year or two, it's very easy to not pay attention and get that thing to sitting just a little too low. And when you're raking, you're pulling ash content into your windrows. But if you pay attention to all that and watch that, you can avoid that. And they do a fantastic job raking. But we're doing our final preps. We maintenance this tedder last winter. Got all the teeth on it, or the tines. Repainted, sealed so nothing rusts, you know, in storage, and everything's ready to go. We checked the gearbox for grease and all that, and everything looked good. I don't like to grease stuff like that if it's already got grease on it in the winter. I like to wait till just a week or 2 before time to start tedding or raking or baling, whatever, and do the final preps so that grease and everything in there is really fresh. It's not sit for a couple months. Your bearings and everything's got fresh grease in them, and you're ready to go. So we are anticipating cutting hay maybe in 4 days, 3 days, 5 days. It's weather dependent. But next week's forecast, I think there was 1 day in the whole week that they were showing about, the weather people were showing about a 30-40% chance of rain. And that's subject to change 1,500 times between now and then, but we're going to keep a close eye on it. So in the meantime, we're going to start greasing up, getting ready. Come along with us. This Rhino PT207 tedder, the main gearbox here, actually takes grease. And when I bought this tedder, I thought it would have gear oil in the gearbox, like most things of this nature. And I was a little surprised to find out that it doesn't. It takes grease in the gearbox. So it has a feel right here, and I've already broken this plug loose. It has another feel, and I don't know if an engineer somewhere sat down and said, hey, let's put this check plug in the very worst, tightest place we can put it. But there's another plug right under this shield that you take out. It's on the top, and you put your grease in here, and you just keep filling it till you see grease start to come out the top. Then you know it's full. So let's do that. We're going to have to, I'm going to leave this plug in until we can get that one under there broke loose. All right, we have the plug out in the front, or on the top, I should say. We're going to remove this fill plug. And does anybody besides me despise a grease gun? Have you ever seen one yet that don't just leak and create messes and just all sorts of havoc? All right, we're gonna just stick this thing in there and start pumping grease until we see some grease come out the top, and it's hard to see. All right, grease is going in. Okay, we got the gearbox full. It took about, I'd say that gear oil goes out into this so far, and it took about not a full tube, but I'd say over half a tube, which, considering the size of the gearbox, is probably not bad. There appeared to be quite a bit of grease still in there. I could tell because it was a different brand of grease than what I'm using. It was a different color. It was a lighter colored grease. But it's full now. We're just tightening up the plug here. And there we go. We are, gearbox is full. We're ready to grease our hubs. Okay, the tedder has 2 grease fittings on each hub. We're going to grease those. And then it has 2 fittings under here for the adjustments to where the tedder turns, and we'll shoot some grease in those and we're done. Okay, so we got the tedder hooked to the tractor, and we're going to give it a test run. Just turn it on and let the basket spin. We just filled it all with grease and let the gearbox turn a little bit. Make sure we don't have a seal that blows out or something like that. You know, Newton's law says if something bad, I think it's Newton's law. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. But anyway, there's an old saying, a certain law or something that somebody famous said that if something can go wrong, it will. Test your equipment real quick before hay season. Get on it if you have the time. Like I've done this one. This is a new piece of equipment to me. New to me, used piece of equipment. I have seen it run, but not to my tractor. So I'm gonna, I've got the PTO hooked and the tethers hooked, and it's starting to actually drizzle a little bit of rain. So I'm gonna hurry. Turn it on, turn the PTO on, and take this thing down our farm road here and let it spin and see how it does, and make sure everything stays together and everything goes well, which I'm about confident it will. One tip when I was hooking up my PTO shaft a minute ago, and this may be elementary to most people, but not long ago I seen a guy do this very thing. When you're putting a PTO shaft to your tractor into an implement, a PTO driven implement, the PTO shaft slides, extends and contracts. Make sure you put the end that does not slide, the big end, to the tractor. Put the end that goes up in that slides to the implement. Always remember that. The big end, the outside of the PTO shaft, goes to your tractor, and the part that slides up in, that's the side, the smaller side, that goes to your implement. I saw somebody not real long ago just very casually just hook it right up, and I noticed he had it on there the wrong way. I didn't see this in person. I saw it on the computer, and he casually jumped right on the tractor and took off, and he may not have had any issues whatsoever, but those PTO shafts are designed to go one way. Make sure you put the big end towards your tractor, and the part that slides out again towards your implement. Okay, everything's hooked up good. Let's give it a whirl, see what happens. So far, so good. I can see that new grease making a ring around the top of those baskets. Perfect. And also, I did grease the PTO shaft. All right, let's go down the way. The tedder's going to be a fantastic addition to our hay production. I'm basically certain. Very pleased with this tedder, especially for the price I paid for it. It is, it runs smooth as silk. I mean smooth. I didn't video ever where I went with it just now and how much I ran it, but I ran it for a good few minutes, and just to get a feel for it and see how it was going to do and how it turned, and I was limited where I could go without having to drive through my hay. I didn't want to do that because it's getting too close time to cut, but man, this little Tedder runs smooth as silk, and this little Kubota runs it perfect. You can run a Tedder like this on very low horsepower. Very low horsepower. Matter of fact, if you've got a little, you know, 18, 20 horsepower tractor that you just keep around your farm or your homestead or whatever, just to till garden with or whatever, you could designate that your tedding tractor. It don't take much to run one of these. It really don't. This one is a 540 PTO speed, and man, I'm pleased with it. Everything on it runs is, I can't imagine a new one run any better. I really can't. So we're quite happy with it. I think it's going to be a good addition to making quality hay. Last year, we late in the season, we lost a lot of hay due to rain. It rained on it, and I'm not talking just a shower on it. The forecast when we cut that hay had about 4 to 5 days of sunshine. Then the next thing you know, we cut hay, and a day and a half later, the forecast changes and we got storms rolling in, and it rained. Half that day, it started about midday, it rained all day, all night, stopped. The next morning, the sun came out a little while, and I thought, well, maybe we can salvage this hay. And literally by, I can't remember exactly, but a little bit later that afternoon, the rains came again, and it downpoured all the rest of the day, all night and half the next day. It ruined our hay. I mean, it wasn't just a sprinkler or a summer shower, it was downpours for a long time. I mean, we had flash flood warnings during that period, if I remember correctly. And if we'd had a Tedder, we might could have salvaged more than we did. We just couldn't, that much hay, by hand, we couldn't get that spread back out. We tried to some and was able to salvage some, but by the time we got to some of the rest of it, underneath was already moldy, and it was done for. It had to be raked up off the field and hauled into the wood line. But in any event, our Tedder looks really good, and hay season's coming up. The last thing I want to do is hear on the news or through the grapevine that a fellow farmer has been injured or worse. Guys, remember, when hay season's coming up, put that ROPS up, that roll bar or ROPS, make sure you've got that joker up and with the lock pins in it, and put your seatbelt on, please. I read a statistic not long ago from, I think it was maybe Farm Bureau or some farming insurance or some farming corporation. And one of the, they talked about the age of people killed in tractor rollovers, and it was not your young guys out here. It was shockingly guys my age and older. Probably experienced on a tractor and just got complacent and comfortable and thought they could take that tractor on the side of that hill or straight up that hill, or, you know, because they was experienced. And I wonder how many of them had their roll bar up and had a seatbelt on. Hay season's coming up. Everybody please be safe. Your family needs you. And that hay, I don't care if you've got the world's best blue ribbon hay, it's not worth your life. Don't do it. If it starts getting sketchy and you get to feeling a little uneasy about it, back off. There's no shame in that. Back away from it and say, hey, I'll mow that down with a weed eater or whatever, or I'll do something with it later. I'm not taking this tractor and this hay mower or tedder or baler, whatever, on the side of that hill. It's too steep. Don't do it. Your family needs you. So everybody be safe. Hopefully the next video we upload to the channel will be cutting hay. Hopefully. It's starting to drizzle rain again. A few minutes ago it started and quit, and it's kind of starting to come again. The skies are looking kind of gray and ominous, like it's going to rain. So good for the hay. All right, we're going to get at it, get everything parked and get out of this rain. Thanks for being with us here today on the farm for our pre-hay season final checkups. We got our rake greased and ready to go. We got our tedder all greased and ran some and ready to go. Next we'll get the drum mower and get it greased, check the gear oil in the grease box, in the gearbox, and grease the baler, the little Farm Max mini round baler, and we'll be ready. We may be cutting hay next week. Thanks for being with us here on the channel. God bless, and I hope you and your family have a wonderful day.